Welcome to the Balanced Ambition podcast. I'm your host, Matt Southam. Here, we delve into candid conversations with entrepreneurs, exploring both their business journey and their secrets to maintaining mental well-being. As we navigate the balance of ambition and inner peace, I hope you find insights, inspiration, and invaluable takeaways in every episode. Thank you for joining us. Hi, George. Welcome to the show today. Let's kick off just by understanding a bit more about you. How did you get into your current line of work?
It's been an interesting journey. And I think where I started quite a few years ago isn't where I expected to end up. But that makes it quite exciting as well. For a majority of the last 25 years, I've worked in venues and hospitality with some of the world's biggest brands and stadiums. And that includes Twickenham Stadium, home of the RFU, Ascot Racecourse, which is obviously one of the most iconic racecourses in the world. I've done work with the Olympics, and also alongside that, worked in other verticals, so education, retail, travel, and health. And the reason why I kind of bring those all up is the basis of everything I've done when it comes to technology in these areas is about cross-sector technology, learning from one vertical and then trying to bring the most important or relevant aspects of that into another vertical. So I guess the pillars of my background are technology, business, and journalism. They're the three disciplines, so I've done a lot of journalistic work in my time, alongside a lot of work within the business environment, but also with a big focus on technology.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned there about sort of that cross-pollination and learning from other industries. And I think we're seeing that slightly now in the way CEOs get appointed. You very often seem to get someone brought in from another sector. You're seeing that in retail. They're bringing in someone from another sector so that actually you can take the skill sets that have been learned somewhere else. But I guess actually the other point of what you mentioned is during your career, and you talk about technology, it has changed considerably during that time as well. So, have you had to adapt just the way you work due to the technology you're implementing?
I think that the pace of change is dramatic, and it's only going to continue to accelerate. We are at a tipping point, actually. But yes, it's going back to that cross-sector technology. It's learning from different verticals. So, one of my big projects at Twickenham Stadium, for instance, was turning that venue into the world's first open loop cashless stadium. And that was driven by the mechanisms outside of sport. So understanding that people that were traveling to the venue were using contactless or Oyster at the time. Okay. And then they would come into this environment and suddenly be told you have to pay with cash. So I was looking at what those people coming to that space were doing and thinking, well, we need to actually adapt. And it wasn't a difficult process because they were already familiar with engaging in this way outside of the venue. So that was, one way of using that as an example. But the general pace of technology is huge. It took us around 40 years for the home PC to penetrate most households. It took the smartphone probably around a decade to do the same thing. And now you look at social media and you look at things like ChatGPT, which nobody had heard of 5 years ago. And now everybody's using in whatever way. So, they're kind of like broad headline points, but that's reflected across every area of technology. And I think the move with artificial intelligence in particular is really going to change the markets in so many ways.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned there about the social networks and ChatGPT, and I did see some stats about, how long it took Instagram to get X amount of users and then how long it took ChatGPT. Do you think part of that is our early acceptance now of technology? Whereas were we cautious before? I'm talking about the general public rather than people working within it.
I would say that I would say there's still an element of caution there. I think that you need to balance it. So I suspect that every one of us in our daily lives, well, I know actually, if you have a smartphone, we're all engaging with artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
And I suspect more than we actually realize. But as this move towards generative AI starts to redefine our lives, I think there's not really any going back. And I don't want to paint it in a negative way, because the general opportunity is huge. There's massive potential there. I think the danger with artificial intelligence is the way that it might start to homogenize content and experiences. So if everybody's fishing from the same pond, effectively, you're not going to get any surprises eventually.
No.
And I think, and I can't take credit for this, but I often have these discussions with my son, who's an adult now, around the concepts of AI. And he came up with the idea to me that at some point in the future, the idea of made by humans may very well become a marketable concept in the same way that, say, vinyl retain currency, because as more and more stuff is driven and created by processes that have machine learning behind them, maybe there's going to be a desire from us as human beings, because we still like that physical interaction with a product. I mean, I can remember as a kid getting excited and actually exploring a vinyl cover, and it was like my connection to the artist. So this concept of made by humans, I think, is something that will gain momentum over the coming years.
Yeah, I can see that as well, because I think, certainly I create a lot of content, and, I still do a lot of video content. So it's me speaking to camera. Obviously, we're starting to see AI influencers as well. And actually that's looking really scary. But you're right. If everything is just created by AI, it does start to look the same. And I know, I mean, one thing I often tell people is, train ChatGPT to write how you want, give it prompts. Don't just, ask it something. And I see it with social media posts. There's so many emojis in there. I'm like, well, that's AI straight away. I can spot it a mile away. But actually, it's really helpful to, for me, I use it to, check my grammar and spelling, and can I improve the clarity on that? And it helps me improve my writing. So there are ways that it can be used. But yes, I can see us going back round to that. What do we actually love? I'm moving slightly off topic on that. There was a big period during COVID when everyone worked from home. And, I'm a strong believer in, I work from home, and I'm really productive there. But what I have found is I have to now make a really conscious effort to be out and meet people, because I've started to miss that. Whereas before, I was a town centre office with the team we catch up online. But a couple of years later, from going a fully remote team, actually, I now miss that interaction. Can you see that?
I can absolutely see it. So whilst I was, during the pandemic, I was head of technology at Ascot Racecourse, and we went through that whole transition. And remember, this is a very traditional business.
Yeah.
The concept of working from home hadn't really stuck with them prior to the pandemic. But once we all had to move to working from home, you very quickly realized what you were missing in terms of that face-to-face interaction. So now, as a consultant, I spend a lot more time working from home, but I make an effort to go out and see people at least twice a week. I want to get out there and speak to people, because I think it's really important. Because otherwise, I feel because you already see it in some of our, the younger population, that lockdown over a 2-year period had significant repercussions, and it's we are social animals, right? We are, regardless of how we might be shy or introverted in some cases, we are still social animals, and we want to interact with one another. And so I think that's one of the dangers I feel around technology, is that in some respects, and you kind of touched upon it just now, in some respects, we have to be careful not to be complacent. So we more and more, we surrender a little bit of ourselves to the technology every day. In that, you mentioned it, spell checking. Okay. I can't remember phone numbers anymore because I don't need to, because they're all in my handset. But what happens if I lose my handset and I've got no point of reference to call somebody? We don't realize it, but we are more and more surrendering this stuff over to the technology, which is perhaps why it's important for us to get out and meet people. We need to, we actually need to keep that, what is inherently human about us. We need to keep that active.
Yeah, I mean, there's a big thing at the moment that, almost life has become too comfortable, and we're moving away from technology. But just 100 years ago, people didn't have hot showers. We didn't necessarily have the air conditioning and central heating and things like that. And life has become very comfortable. And AI, I guess, also provides that opportunity to us not have to think as much. And an example, I went on a journey last month. We drove about 2 and a bit hours. And I sort of thought, how did I do this journey 20 years ago? And I remember printing out, you'd go on, I think it was the AA or the RAC, would do a route map and you'd print it out and then you'd have your map. Well, even if I'm going 15 minutes away, if I don't quite know where I go, I just put the postcode in and just blindly follow the sat nav. I don't really even consider myself which way I should go. And I don't even track my journey. So, yeah, I can see that actually we surrender, I think, is a really good word.
Yeah, you've got to be mindful of the fact that the more you become reliant on these systems, the more that, and I don't want to sound like a technophobe because I'm absolutely not that, but there's got to be balance. Okay, there's got to be balance, and I think we should all actually engage in some form of tech fasting. A period of time, whether it's one day, whether it's a few hours a day, whatever, where you use your mind, okay, to solve a problem. You don't defer to the technology, because actually now, if somebody asks any of us, me included, a question that we don't know the answer to, we'll automatically go to Google or ChatGPT for the answer, and we'll kind of accept it. Yeah. Without really, where's the validation? How do we know? Right. And the more we accept it, the more complacent it makes us. So I think your point again about life has become very comfortable is probably very true. We have first world problems for first world populations that I think in some sense mean we've moved so far away from where we were even 30 years ago. And I think we are, when I say we're at a tipping point, I believe that after 20,000 plus years of human evolution, we're about to enter the first stage where we will no longer be the most intelligent point of reference on the planet. So imagine that. Imagine all of us as human beings suddenly coming to terms with the fact that we're not number one.
Yeah,
because the technology is going to overtake us, and that's quite. So aside from all of the issues that exist in society around gender equality, racism, whatever, think about that point, because there's no going back from that. It's not as if suddenly we are going to be, and unless we use the technology to enhance ourselves physically and mentally, we're never going to claim that number one spot again.
No, that's a really good point. That the less we use our brains, the less we retain information, and your brain's a muscle, it grows, obviously. And I saw a great study. I can't remember it exactly, so this is a little bit of a butcher of it, but it basically showed a selection of people, sort of 5 words, and they had to look at the 5 words and then come back and then try and remember them. And they showed the other people the same 5 words, but they'd missed out a couple of the letters on the words, which meant you just had to take that little bit longer to work out what the word was. And by doing that, you were much more likely to remember it because you had thought about the word rather than just seen it. Yeah. And it just shows that if we don't actually make some effort, if there's no effort in obtaining information, we tend to forget it.
That's absolutely right. I mean, it's all about. I think we are less concerned with the details. We just want the headline points, and social media actually has made us that way as well. I mean, it is quite concerning to think that so many people today will get their news from social media, and they will accept in many cases, because they follow certain brands or certain individuals, they will accept what they're being told without looking for verification. When I was, and you know, I'm kind of dating myself a little bit here, but you know, when I was growing up and studying, unfortunately, it was all about doing your research and finding the answers. Today, you don't need to know how to get to 4. You don't need to know that 2 + 2 = 4, because there's a system telling you that.
Yeah.
And that's where the worry is. I feel that we are slowly creating this big gap between the technology we rely on and who we are as human beings. And let me say something controversial. At the moment, things like Google Maps is free, right? It's free to use. But who's to say, once everybody's reliant upon it, who's to say that a subscription model won't be introduced? And who's to say that if we don't use maps anymore, and this is our only mechanism for travel, who's going to say, no, I'm not going to use that, or I'm not going to pay for that?
Yeah.
So you can see how the general model for all services now, it's all paid for. It's less about what you own anymore. It's all about leasing it. So the you know, it's like software as a service has gone to a whole new level. Everything from, you know, Netflix to even at home appliances now, it's all kind of leased. And I don't like the idea. I'm not a materialistic person, but I don't like the idea that you know, you'll own nothing and you'll be happy, because it doesn't. It feels like there's an emptiness there if everything is digital and everything is leased and nothing is yours. It's almost like you're just some kind of transient being on this conveyor belt. And that's you know, that approach doesn't work for me. I think there's the physical aspects of all the physical aspects of life are still hugely important.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned Google Maps there, and to be fair, they sort of did this, certainly within, you know, pretty much every website, you know, we've ever worked on, people would embed a Google Map and you'd display where you were using a Google Map. And then suddenly, oh, okay, no, it's not free. You need to set up an API and put in your card details. Now, admittedly, they give you, I can't remember what it is, 10,000 a month views, you know, so for most small businesses, you can just still display the Google Map for free. But actually, you know, certainly for companies that need to get a lot of traffic or need to display pinpoints, they need to start paying for it. And because Google was the big model, it was free, everyone was using it, there was less competition to be able to change to.
But then when it moves, you know, when this moves to the individual consumer, okay, so the person that might jump into their car and just stick their phone on the dashboard and use Google Maps, when every piece of movement is all around, there's a cost model attached to everything. You're not going to suddenly turn around and say, I'm not going to do it. And I think that's the other thing about human enhancement, and it's been said by academics and a whole plethora of writers on this in the AI and technology field. I think the next phase of evolution for us as human beings could very well be enhancements that come from AI-driven applications. So imagine the ability to be able to walk into a room and recognize whether it's from heart sensors or whether it's from body movements, recognize all of the people around the table that you're going to be speaking to and understand a little bit about them. That's fed to you via a system. It gives you an advantage. And I do worry that we'll move into another kind of class system that becomes those that have the tech and those that don't. Okay. In that those that have the tech will have significant advantages over those that don't. And all of that comes with a cost to it.
Yeah, I mean that's delving really into that sort of human cultural and society and like you say classes. I guess I mean, we've seen it in the past within school systems. We know that actually children who get read to every evening or who read to their parents because their parents have got time to do that generally do better. They're further ahead in reading, whereas other people are growing up in families where actually parents are working two jobs. They haven't got the books and things like that, and actually they're at a disadvantage through no fault of their own. And
That's right.
actually we can see that with technology. People coming home, they can do their homework on a computer, they're not disturbed. Other people can't. So I guess part of that already exists, but I guess that could expand and expand quite rapidly.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that you could use as an example, and you've kind of already touched upon it now. If if there are still people that don't have a decent home computer, for instance, or a laptop, right, to do their work on, or they might have an aging system because they can't afford something new, and that's part of that problem is the pace of change. Okay, the things change so dramatically that you feel like you're constantly upgrading. And I have a personal view on this. I feel this technology has forced us into a way of thinking where everything is disposable or everything is replaceable. Right. So you get the latest phone, and literally as soon as you've got it, people are talking about what the next version of that phone is going to be.
Yeah.
And this swap out culture is starting to filter down in so many other areas of society. And I, again, it might be controversial, but I genuinely feel that this is one of the reasons why we do have this rise in mental health issues, because we have a generation of young people who have been brought up with a smartphone, and that smartphone provides all the answers immediately. So if they want something, they want an answer to something, they can find it. If they want to buy something, they don't even need to leave their bedroom; they can just order it. If they want food delivered, and then that's great. But then what happens when you put those people in a physical, practical, real life scenario where they face a challenge that the smartphone can't answer? And I don't think enough of those skills are being either taught or nurtured. And I think that could come back to bite us in the future, because if the only way for engagement for a lot of people is via a smartphone or via a screen, what happens when they come when they come face to face with either somebody or a specific challenge?
Yeah. Are we, are we going to have a generation who, when I say aren't tough enough, I'm cautious in the way I'm using that word, but you're right. Everything's been very easy. But that ease is causing other problems that are really hard. And that's in the mental state that lots of people are suffering from.
And that's, I think a lot of so throughout my life, especially in my working life, but even just generally, I think I always say sometimes it's good to sit on an uncomfortable chair, right? And the reason why I say that is you don't ever want to get too complacent, because change is always just around the corner. And one of the big things that stops people doing stuff, particularly in business, I've seen it myself, is fear. But it's trying to get people to understand, well, what are you afraid of? Because it's not a big deal if you fail, right? It might feel like it at the moment when it happens. But even the biggest failures, and I'm not saying for one moment I want people to fail. I'm just saying you understand a lot from falling down and getting up again. There's a lot that you can actually process. There's a lot about yourself that you come to understand. I would be very reluctant to ever employ anybody that said to me, I've never had a failure. I always get things right. Because A, I probably wouldn't believe them. And B, I guess I'd be thinking, well, does that mean your first mistake's going to be with me? Right. Not that I've got a problem with that, but then how are you going to process it once you have to deal with it? right?
Yeah.
So there's lots of unknowns when you look at the people that you work with and the people that you engage with on a daily basis. I think a rounded person is probably more likely to be a successful one, because they've taken some knocks. They understand what needs to be done. I think one of the key words here is resilience. Okay, the ability to develop a level of resilience that means that you can deal with a challenge, or you won't be put off by an obstacle. The most successful people are generally not the most charismatic or the most intelligent. They are the most determined. They are the people where everybody else stops knocking at the 99th door. They're the people that knock on the 100th door and they get the sale or they get the interest. Right. And that's, I think that's the key to success. I wouldn't even say just in business. I would say just generally in life. It's determination. It's the desire not to give up because you have a clear idea of what it is you want to achieve. Okay. And nothing is going to deviate you from that path. Is that level of resilience? Is that level of determination? Is that level of commitment being eroded by surrendering too much of ourselves to the technology? I'm not sure, but I feel that there's a possibility it is.
Yeah, there's some great bits in there. I mean, certainly I'm a big believer that, mistakes and failure, they're just the tuition fees we pay for experience and knowledge and things like that.
That's a great way of putting it, yeah.
Yeah, you do have to go through it. That's the way we learn. And actually, there's a big thing I've got an issue with, sort of, the overnight success that people sort of see. Actually, no, you often get overnight recognition, but actually, you've been doing this for a long while. These people who we suddenly see blow up, actually, they've been, whatever it is, whether, it's a top footballer or whatever, they've been kicking the ball in the back garden for years. But we don't see that. And maybe that's where there's that combination of instant access plus seeing other people doing well, that actually people think this is going to be easy and I can just do it. But actually determination and grit and resilience is what sets you apart.
Yeah, well, I mean, social media is not that I want to make all social media platforms the villain, but I think it's, when you because just generally people these days will not post about what they have. It's about what they're doing, right? It's experience. You hear this term in business all the time about experience or experiential, but, and I think it's overused actually, but when you go on social media, most people, certainly on platforms like Facebook or Instagram, will post up positive images, and it's all about look where I am or look what I'm doing. But there's no context to it. Right? No. So if you're somebody sat at home, maybe working from home, maybe not seeing a lot of people, and sees posts like this, it can be uplifting, but it can also be demoralizing, right? Because you feel, well, why aren't I doing that? Why am I not? But you don't know the story behind that picture, or you don't know the story behind that post. And so context is very important. I think context is missed, in a world where X is telling you to put up your feelings in as brief a number of words as you can. Again, context is missing.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. And it is very easy to compare your behind the scenes to someone else's highlight. And that's what social media does, because people do put up the highlight reel. So
yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, it's like, most people will not post up terrible things that have happened to themselves unless it's a complaint, right? Or they want to demonize a company or somebody. But genuinely, it's look what I've done, look how wonderful life is, and that's fine. I also feel that the people that live in this kind of online world, that likes become the true currency for everything. It's very dangerous. So when you watch streaming platforms like Netflix, for instance, and you might come to the end of a series and then it's immediately prompting you, you should watch this or you should like this. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think the danger there is you could get caught into a cycle of just watching the same kind of material. So when do you get taken out of your zone of comfort if you're just doing the same things over and over? Yeah. And that could be the same for preferences that are pushed out to you on things like Amazon, right? You have to step outside of your zone of comfort. You have to, otherwise you're not going to learn. If all you eat is cheese, you're going to lose the taste for chocolate, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's probably not the best explanation, but you get my point.
Yeah, completely. And you know, but we see that on social media, don't we? You sort of think, well, actually, do I agree with that because that is my belief system, or do I agree with that because that's all I'm being fed? And you know, we do have that, you know, that I guess that unconscious bias towards finding things that we agree with. You know, if you can,
echo chambers, isn't it? I mean, it's like you're caught in those traps, and I think that you watch the media, listen to the media, watch I mean, I don't watch a lot of television, but the world that's portrayed in adverts, on in the media, in movies, is not the real world. I mean, you could argue it never has been, but it is not a reflection of the society or the lives that we live today. And that's part of the problem as well. I mean, everybody today, because the visual nature of social media, everybody today thinks they can be the next, I don't know, Ed Sheeran, or the next Coldplay. And the reality is, the harsh lesson is that you can't, right? I mean, we have to be realistic about it. If we all raise our children to believe that they're going to be the next Elon Musk, it's great if they aspire to be like that. I mean, I just use him as an example, but most people won't. Most people will fail. And how are they going to deal with that? How are they going to deal with that if they're following this narrative through social media or through streaming platforms that you can be anything you want to be?
Yeah,
I think that message needs to be broken down. I think what it means is you might get the opportunity to try and be whatever you want to be, but it doesn't mean that you're going to be successful.
No, I think it is just understanding that, but if you do fail, keep going if it is something that you want to do, and I guess having different levels of what success means to you as well. That's a key one. You know, we quite often put a financial metric on success, but actually success is being happy, you know, in what you're doing.
You're so right. You're so right. I mean, I think that my gut feeling has always been, okay, and it probably doesn't make sense when you think about business, because the core point of business is to make money, right? To generate revenue. But I think you'll get further in life if you have a good idea. Okay, a good idea, or money will follow a good idea. I think anybody that sets out just to make money, I think it's more of a challenge, right? And I also think it's less satisfying, because it's not really an ambition. It's kind of like the same as somebody that says, I want to be famous. Well, what do you want to be famous for?
Why?
Why? Right. Yeah. so that's it. And so it is a very odd state of affairs that we find ourselves in. And it is, I think, as I said, not like I just want to continually demonize the technology, but I think there is the social media platforms have to take a degree of responsibility. And also I think we need to be careful and mindful of where AI is going to take us, because at the top of that food chain are a small number of people that are making a large amount of money.
Yeah.
Okay. And you think about societies where huge populations are all controlled, where they're all facing in the same direction. It makes them easier to control. And I think that's one of the risks around AI. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, completely. Just to sort of almost, you know, come to an end today, like, what are the benefits of, yeah, because we've knocked technology and AI and things like that, but it can have some really positive impacts, certainly on things like social mobility, and I guess access to knowledge. We were saying we don't want it that it's just a case of, oh, I've got the answer, great, but actually it provides almost anyone with an internet connection to get access to information resources that in the past lots of people wouldn't have had, and certainly in developing countries and things like that. So yeah, what are the big positives of technology? What can we be enthusiastic about, I guess, for the future?
There's huge amounts to be enthusiastic about. I mean, in the hospitality industry, for instance, yeah, there's been a crisis around staffing since post pandemic, because a lot of people moved when many venues were closed. A lot of people weren't able to work, and so they migrated to other sectors. There's huge opportunities for technology to actually supplement that loss of staff. I do a lot of work on voice platforms. I particularly working with brands like Amazon and their Alexa platform and Samsung. So in hospitality, has the ability to kind of change that whole model, because again, it's familiar technology. If you think about the number of people that have an Alexa device at home, and then on top of that, we've seen great successes in senior living. I'm one of these people that does not believe for one moment, because I can evidence it. When they say that technology is just, or they have said historically, technology is more aimed at the young. I work extensively on the health side of things, with people that are much older, in the 70s, 80s, 90s, even 100s. And we've put voice technology in place, and they've been able to use it. They've picked it up really quickly. So as a mechanism for engagement, as a mechanism to combat loneliness, as a mechanism to provide a window into the world for those people that maybe because of age, or because of challenges around mobility, they can't get out as much. One of our key partners is the Royal Air Force Association. We do some great work with them and their care homes, or the residential homes, and putting these devices in all of those spaces and allowing the residents to interact with them. These are people that, just because you get to a certain age doesn't mean you forget how to learn something. No. And if they're shown how something works, and I got to say, I think for the older population, voice is really intuitive, because you're not saying to them, press this button and open up this window and make sure this is charged up and make sure it's updated. None of that is relevant to an Amazon device. It's just a case of speak to it, talk to it, ask it for something. And yeah, until recently, she passed away, unfortunately, but I think our oldest user on that platform was 104.
Wow.
Yeah, she would make video calls. So this is a version of that called Alexa Smart Properties, which is a version of that system, which is specifically tailored for the senior living, health, and hospitality, because it has certain security mechanisms built into it. It's kind of like their enterprise version.
Yeah.
And that's been really positive, and a lot of that is driven by general AI.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great finisher, isn't it? There is some really positives, and we can use technology to actually, help people carry on in their life. Because I think many of us are worried we're just going to get old and that's it. We're not going to know what to do. I certainly have sort of grappled with that, but actually, technology is potentially going to enable us to stay in touch with people and continue to learn.
Think about the benefits in the general health system. The ability for artificial intelligence to actually help diagnose quickly particular conditions, maybe aid consultants and doctors. Some of these systems can process data. Well, they definitely can, much faster than we're able to.
Yeah.
And so it's going to help with the diagnosis process. I think as time passes, it's also going to help when we're seeking cures to some of the worst the worst illnesses that we still have to grapple with. So yeah, I mean, there's huge, and you see it with vehicles now. Everything that's kind of looking to be autonomous is going to be driven by this kind of technology, which makes life a lot easier for us. It's going to mean that we're going to have to be quite creative, because I think there will come a time when universal basic income kicks in, and we're going to have to fill our time in different ways, which is maybe when we'll see a greater return to more outdoor pursuits, which I think is missing. Maybe that's what the technology will help us do. Maybe help us to reconnect with our natural environment.
Yeah, I guess there's lots of positives, and it's going to be an interesting space to keep an eye on. And obviously, you're quite at the forefront with this as well, and you're clearly passionate about what you're talking about. George, I just want to thank you for joining me today. It's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you. I wish you all the best in everything you're doing, and carry on with the great work that you are doing.
Thank you. That's really kind of you. It's been a really interesting conversation.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Balanced Ambition podcast. I genuinely hope the stories inspire you as much as they inspire me. If you found value in today's conversation, please share it with a friend. And remember, by subscribing, you won't miss an episode, and it would truly mean the world to me. Stay balanced, and I'll see you next time.